Welcome to the Princess and the Bee podcast, the place to be to build your empire as queen of your body, business, and life. I'm your host, Kimberly Spencer, founder of crownyourself.com, and I'm an award-winning coach, Amazon best-selling author, and multi-passionate entrepreneur. Each week, I give you the systems, strategies, and success stories to help you master your mindset, communicate with ease, and triple your productivity so you make the income and the impact you deserve. Imagine this podcast as your weekly spark of inspiration as you take it to the next level with all the B's of your life. Body, business, bank account, boys, and babies. Let's make it rain. Hello and welcome back to The Princess and the Bee. I am so ridiculously excited to have this guest on the show because she knew me in my past life as a Pilates instructor. She was one of my amazing clients, and she had one of the most powerful and profound bodily transformations that I have ever experienced or seen in any of my clients ever in 10 years of teaching. And we will dive into that on this episode as well. Who I am bringing on today is Meredith Prunkard. She is an executive producer and showrunner in the television industry. Her focus is on female-centric programming from linear, network, and cable projects to OTT and digital content. Her work includes the Women's Image Award-winning series Funny Girls, which portrays the plight of female comics working in a male-dominated industry, and Hello Sunshine's Master the Mess. In her spare time, Meredith serves as an executive board member of the Los Angeles chapters of Together We Will and Pantsuit Nations, which are grassroots progressive activist groups. She is a volunteer with the Southern California Bulldog Rescue and a foster parent to the Senior Bulldog Hospice Program. She lives in Northeast LA with her husband, Ben, and her beloved American Bulldog, Breslin. Meredith, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on your podcast, and I love it so much. Love it. So thank you for doing what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing what you do, and I just find your success and your specific area of expertise as a producer and showrunner, specifically with a lot of reality show content, or what would be called reality show content, is fascinating to me. So how did you get started in doing what you do?
Well, I've always wanted to work in TV. I've known since I was a kid that I wanted to work in TV. But I think I always gravitated toward, I thought that I would end up in the sitcom world. I really gravitated toward comedy. And I thought, that's all I really knew when I was a kid. It's I don't really know what it means to make TV, but I know that I want to do just that. So, and the shows that I loved, and the shows that the show that inspired me to even want to do this career was Golden Girls. So I kind of and then as I grew up and my kind of TV preferences evolved into, stuff like Seinfeld and The State and Mr. Show and just comedy sketch stuff, sitcoms, all of that is I just assumed that I would go down that path. But then when I moved to LA, the first thing that I was kind of offered was an unscripted shows. It was a plastic surgery reality show. This was back in 2004, called Dr. 90210. And what I learned working on that show, because I was I'll do this for now. It's my foot in my foot in the door, and I'll, kind of see what this is all about. And then, eventually I'll get into scripted. But I realized from working on that show that from the feedback from not just the cast, the people that, the doctors helped on the show or whatever, but also people who watched the show, and they would send emails to the production company and they would say, oh my gosh, watching the show, I don't feel so alone, or watching the show, I realized that there's hope. And I know it's a plastic, there's a lot of, reconstructive stuff and a lot of pro bono work. And I think people felt when people were watching it, they were oh my God, I have this burden that I've been carrying around, and now maybe there's something, I can do something about it. And when I realized the way that made me feel, I thought, oh my gosh, reality TV is just kind of ramping up, and we didn't even know what it was at that point in time, like back in 2004. But what I did know is I thought like, well, okay, so we have the ability to reach people everywhere, you know, and it's real people, and you know, there people can, the work that I would be doing be reaching people kind of like on a much more relatable level than anything that I would be doing in scripted. And so I kind of went for it. And then the more, like, as the years went by, I kind of tailored, you know, the jobs that I took to, you know, into the comedy space. And then as I became, you know, able to kind of be even more, you know, picky about the projects that I accepted, female centric kind of like took over. So now I'm really in this comedy, this female centric comedy, you know, unscripted world that I really, really love.
Amazing. I think it's so interesting because reality or unscripted television, it has so many different connotations for so many different types of people. But I love how you took this powerful benefit that you saw from people having that relatability to the characters and to the story. So what is it about unscripted television? How do you craft that story that makes it so relatable on an episode to episode basis and on like the whole series basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a process because, you know, you always want to be, I mean, if you're doing it with integrity, you always want to make sure that you're, you know, obviously telling the true stories and really kind of doing, you know, doing the cast justice, you know, like doing what you came to do and keeping your promises to the cast. I think that's like really important. You know, the audience is going to know if something feels fake. And so, but it's difficult because you can't just turn the camera on and follow somebody around for 6 months to a year. We have to have a plan when we go in, you know, so we spend about, you know, anywhere from like 4 to 6 weeks or longer sometimes before we start shooting, getting to know the cast, you know, hanging out with them every single day, finding out what goes on in their lives, learning, you know, spending time with their families, spending time with their friends, spending time with them at work, whatever the show is about or whatever the subject is. It's like, it's just getting to know them so personally. It's like a crash course in like their day-to-day lives. And then, you know, you develop a relationship with them and you like get to the point where you guys are kind of being vulnerable with each other and to where you kind of like, you get a really good sense of who they are and what is going on in their lives. And then we kind of decide what the stories are. We plan what we're going to shoot and what the stories are based on kind of this pre-production period. Right. And then once we start shooting, most of the time that plan goes completely out the window, you know, because then other things come up in their lives. And then we decide we have to make the decision, are we going to follow what's happening, or are we going to kind of stick with this other thing that we already planned on? And depending on just how things go, you know, usually you always kind of want to follow like what's actually happening, unless the cast isn't comfortable with it. But anyway, so then after we're done shooting, which, you know, depending on how many episodes it is anywhere from like, you know, 10 weeks to 20 weeks or whatever, you know, we're back in edit and post. And then it's, you know, now it's up to us to, you know, cut everything down into like a half hour or an hour format. And again, maintain the integrity of what really happened and making sure that the voice that we're giving to the cast is their voice. And so then we spend, you know, a few months then in post, like putting the episodes together. And then we go through a grueling notes process with the production company and the network. And it's very collaborative and you know, in my mind, like that's the most important part of the process is the post process. And
why is that?
I think because, well, it's the last stop. You know, there's nowhere to go after that. You know, when you shoot, after you shoot, there's still all these possibilities because, you know, you have to craft the stories into the, you know, the total running time. And so, you know, there's still so many kind of ways that the stories can go after we shoot. Once we get in there and start putting everything together and seeing kind of like how everything takes shape, like that is where the show is made, is in post. And also it's where the show sings. You know, we call it making the sausage when we're shooting it and we're like in the process of editing it, 'cause it's not a pretty sight, you know. Raw footage is not pretty. It is, you know, it's very dirty. It's very messy. It's very, you know, that's like where all the sweat is. And then,
this is coming from a vegan.
Exactly, yes. It's how the soy riso is made. But then once it's made, you know, it's fucking delicious. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. Drop the F-bombs all the way.
So once the sausage is made and it's cooked, it's fucking delicious. And that's like, you know, and that's like the dessert for me, is like the reward of, you know, kind of seeing you know, all of the blood, sweat, and tears come together. And you know, the absolute best part about it is when the cast watches it for the first time. And, you know, everything for me personally kind of hangs on what their reactions are. And if they feel that if they still trust me, and if they feel like that I told their stories the way that they wanted me to, then I feel really, really good. And that's what it's all about.
Oh, I love it, because I can tell you from having been on an unscripted show, as some of my listeners have known or seen, like Chicken Soup for the Soul followed us around on a show called Being Dad. They were highlighting my husband because he was an older dad. He was becoming a dad at the age of 50. And so we got this opportunity, and for me, I was in the beginning stages of really ramping up my coaching business and becoming a mother. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to highlight this massive transformational shift in our world of bringing a living being into this world. And I remember watching the show with Spike after filming and doing all the interviews and all that stuff. And I was so glad to have had that experience, because seeing it, like, they captured this moment that is, as looking back, I'm like, oh, I don't remember much of that, but it happened, because that first sort of like end of, you know, pregnancy to beginnings of becoming a mother, like very much a blur. Especially when growing a business at the same time. But like looking back, it was so beautiful to watch that evolution and to have that preserved in time. And so I think there are so many beautiful stories that are out there to be told, and that's the benefit of what you do. Now, I love, especially Meredith, that you talk about the integrity of really preserving that with the story. So what made integrity such a key value for you when it comes to your job and your life?
I think with my job, because early on I got to taste that like really sweet, that really great feeling of getting positive feedback and not realizing that I was going to be helping people. It kind of was, I was like, I want to feel that again. You know, I mean, it's all like, it's not altruistic at all. It's super selfish.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this feels so good. And then, you know, and then I've done, you know, and so I think like moving forward, and, you know, I've done shows that are not like, you know, I did Rock of Love with Bret Michaels. I did a dating show with Tila Tequila. I mean, like in my early
I remember that one. You know, I remember that one from back in like the early 2000s.
I mean, I've done a lot of stuff that is not, you know, I've done like the quote unquote, like, you know, trashy, like reality TV. I mean, I don't bash those productions, because honestly, there were some like really amazing moments in those, but I've done the shows that I haven't kind of gotten that like feedback on, that like amazing kind of thank you, you've helped me kind of feedback. And then I've done those that I do get that. And I think now that I'm in this position to where I can kind of pick and choose, like, you know, which projects I want to do. It's like, I'm going for the shows and the content where I can kind of chase that, and I can kind of feel good about what I do when I go to bed at night. And in my life, you know, it's helped me in the same way. I mean, I have taken so many lessons from this career, things that I've learned over the years, and applied them to my life. And my life is not even close to being where, you know, I was a hot mess, and like this in my 20s, and this career has helped me to kind of streamline my life and to get organized and to become like an amazing kind of like time manager and you know, and being like super organized, and like even in just the way that my thoughts are formed now, it's much different. So, you know, so it's not just the integrity kind of that I do try to apply in like other areas of my life, but there's a lot that this career has given me, you know, which sounds stupid because like you said earlier, to your point about, you know, there being a stigma with reality TV, or you said that there's like different connotations.
Yeah.
There certainly is. And I really am actively trying to change that by, you know, by talking about the shows out there that really can be, you know, transformative. And
that's why I was like, I had to have you on, because I was like, what you're doing I know where you come from with such a place of good-heartedness and that sort of mission that's driving you forward beyond just like the unscripted stuff that sometimes, you know, especially when you're first starting out, that's kind of the stuff that you aren't in a position yet to be able to choose, like where you are now, where you can choose which shows you work on.
Yeah. And, you know, in the beginning, you're just kind of feeling it out like any other industry, and kind of going where the money is or where the work is. I'm freelance, you know?
Yeah. So what was your training for this position? Did you go to film school? Did you go to college? Did you just like one day wake up and decide like, I'm going to be, you know, producing TV?
I went to college. I went to Bowling Green State University, and they had a really great video production program. And so I got a telecommunications degree, and I learned a lot of stuff that is like basically was obsolete by the time I graduated. But because it's tech, you know, but yeah. I learned a ton of fundamentals that, you know, helped prepare me for this career. But really, like, on the job training is where I have learned everything I know. You know, it's through the experience, through the doing, just going through it, and like, you know, dropping the ball a million times and then picking it back up and learning from it. And that's really, and it doesn't ever end.
Yes.
Especially since I'm freelance. And so every job I do, you know, is different. You know, nothing has the same process. The people are all different. The processes are different. The storytelling, you know, ends up being different. There's always so I'm constantly learning new things, which is another part of this profession that I love so much.
I love that. So as a child, did you dream of being a storyteller? Like, what are the similarities from the things that you wanted to be as a kid to what you're doing now?
When I was a kid, I was really creative, and I was a storyteller, and I was a writer, and I would write stories, and I would write like mini books, and I would come up with, you know, I was really creative in that way. And so storytelling was always kind of like in my heart. But, you know, I never knew, there was no frame of reference for growing up in like a, you know, a lower kind of middle class area of Detroit. And, you know, going to a very small high school where, you know, doing anything outside of the box is not celebrated at all. It's definitely not encouraged. Nobody was encouraging me to like follow my dreams. It was like, you know, it was like, you know, you can work in the automobile industry, you can be an engineer, you know, you can be a nurse or a doctor, which all of those things are like super respectable and great. But not something that I was interested in. So all I knew that is that I had like this kind of itch to get the hell out of where I was. I still have my like life back in Detroit, and I love so much, like my closest friends are there still to this day. I've known them since I was like 3 years old, and they're still my best friends. And I love the city that I'm from, but something was calling me. I needed to go somewhere where my kind of like creative urges were going to be, you know, kind of where I could scratch that itch and feel like there were more opportunities for me.
Yeah. And so did you directly move from Detroit to your college town to LA, or were there stops along the way?
Basically, about 2 weeks after I graduated, I had picked a day, January 16th, 2004. And I was like, I had no money because I was like terrible at saving. And I knew, even though I knew that this date was coming up for months and months and months, like literally a year, I knew that I was leaving on this day. And then when that day came, I had zero money. I was just like, what did I do? So my friend like loaned me $1,300. I got a U-Haul. I towed my car behind it. And my mom and I, who also had no money, like we put my dog in the car and then in the U-Haul, and we just drove together to LA. We had like a bunch of canned food and packed like a cooler and like canned beans and tuna. And like, this is before I was vegan, and drove and slept in the car. And I was just like, this is just what I'm doing. And then I got so lucky because I landed a job, like literally I got there on a Saturday and I landed a job on Monday somehow, like literally started on Monday. Like I walked into a place to E-Entertainment and I was like, you guys need a PA? And they were like, actually. Yeah.
Wow. You were that bold to you just walked into E-Entertainment and were like, you guys need a PA? Really?
I wasn't that bold because I had interned there the summer before.
Okay.
So I had been in the building before. I knew some of the people there. So I was not that bold, no.
But still, that takes guts, girl. Like what I love about your story is you were decisive. You made that decision. And like, even when the time to like act on the decision, there were not many resources. You found them, you found a way. And by Monday, you had a job once you were in LA. Like that just shows the amazing grit and resilience that you have. It's just phenomenal. Like that's no wonder that you're successful. Like, so looking at that, what was the biggest lesson from that moment that you just made the decision, you drove across country and then you landed in LA to now? What was the biggest lesson that you've learned along the way?
I was like when I was younger and when all through college and really like, I still struggle with it, but I was such a people pleaser when I was younger. And I really think it was a setback for me, kind of like as I was just coming up in my career. Mm-hmm. But I've learned, I've learned along the way that is not how you make change. And that's not how you make good TV in my case. And the product is never going to be as good when you're only just trying to kind of appease the powers that be and not rock the boat and not have strong opinions. Like those are the things I was afraid. I was afraid of people in positions that were higher than me, essentially, when I was younger. And so that's been a big lesson for me to learn. And that I have done, it took me a long time and I still struggle with it sometimes, but that's been my biggest lesson. And it's been like like I said, it's been a really tough one for me.
Yeah. That's one that I see so commonly with women, like myself included. Like it's that sort of disease to please of being taught, like, don't rock the boat, don't speak up. Like I found that for me, like challenging, when I was a kid, I always used to challenge sort of behavior that was not people's highest and best, specifically when it came to my dad. And like that thing that I was, scolded for as a child of, try to acquiesce, try to not rock the boat. I was like, wow, that just feels so out of integrity for me that now, like as a coach, that's like my superpower of being able to lovingly challenge. So looking at like when you were a kid before, like, did you always feel like you had this disease to please, or like, were there things that you kind of got in trouble for as a child, like rocking the boat? I'm just curious.
I really had this issue my whole life. Like I really did. I mean, look, I got, I butted heads a lot with my parents, that they were excluded. They were excluded from this like need to please. I didn't, I butted heads with them a lot.
Yeah.
And any boyfriend I ever had and my now husband, that the people who were kind of closest to me, I think were always my friends though. No, I really always did want to please them. I was always the person that never, I really didn't get into a lot of fights with my friends because I just kind of like let them walk all over me because I was like, I never wanted to make somebody feel bad, or more specifically, I never wanted somebody to feel bad because of me. So it was more like, I didn't want somebody to have anger directed at me or like bad feelings directed at me. I always wanted people to like me. So it wasn't even like, it was a very kind of almost narcissistic kind of maybe quality where I was just I just needed to be liked, and like I wanted everybody to think I was like so great. So I never wanted to make anybody feel bad. And that is kind of where it came from, I think. I'm no therapist, but I think that's where it came from.
So looking at that though, like when was that moment that you shifted, that you realized your power, where instead of like longing to be liked by people in power, you just were like, hey, I'm going to rock the boat a little bit. I'm going to share, I'm going to give my strong opinion about, what I think I should do, or with the show or wherever. When was that moment did you have a specific event or experience?
Yeah, I think it was really like, it did compound over like the course of, kind of my when I became kind of like an above the line producer, and I started having more responsibility. I think it compounded, and I started kind of learning. But there was one show, it wasn't that long ago, honestly. I think you and I were together at this point. I think we had just started working together back in 2015. And I did this show, and it could have, and it got really messed up. Like my counterpart, I was doing post, my counterpart was doing field. He got fired. I ended up having to take over field and also do post. And it could have gone two ways. And had I been firm in my objections to, the way things were, and said like, hey, this is what we need. These are the resources that we need. And I'm not able to kind of like stand by this product if I don't have these things. So if I said that, if I would have stood up for like the things that I know that I needed, instead of trying to kind of either be the hero and save the show by just like using what I had and trying to like just do everything, which is impossible. But I thought, fuck it, I can do this. I really should have taken a step back and been like, okay, what are the issues here? What did, my predecessor, like, what did he, the guy that got fired, like, what did he kind of miss that I can now step in and assess and then learn from? But instead, I just kind of let everything just steamroll me. And it did not go well at all. And that was like the worst experience that I've had on a show. But every subsequent show after that, I have noticed that I've really kind of come into my power, and I've taken those. I think without actively thinking it, I think I was just like, I've had enough. I had like a period of grieving after that really awful experience where I had a couple of months off before I found my next job, and I like meditated, and I really like just kind of dug deep, and I was like, I think I realized that I had to start speaking up, and I had to be more of a leader. And I think that that's when, and every subsequent show has been very empowering for me. And I've really felt like I've been like a different person ever since then in terms of like where I am in my career. And I feel a lot stronger. And so I think that for me, that was that show was kind of like a defining moment for me. And so like now it's kind of like my career is divided into two parts. It was before that show and it was after that show. And so I'm grateful for that kind of like failure, I guess.
I love that. I think failure is like the best way to radically quantum leap.
Yeah.
In essence. I know that you said that was like back when we first started working together. Was that when you were dealing with your back issues as well?
Yeah. So
I would love for you to go into that just a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you a quick backstory. I'll keep it short, but I think I was around 10 years old when I found out that I had scoliosis, and I'm not sure why. I've been having lower back pain specifically since I was 10 years old, and I'm going to be 39 next month.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. And I, just kind of dealt with it I just got, I think like anybody who has chronic pain, you get used to it after a while. And I'd always been active, but there would be like about a week every year or more that my back would like, quote unquote, just go out. And like, I would be kind of bedridden for a week or so. But I always had lower back pain. There's not a day went by in my life where I didn't have lower back pain, and I wouldn't wake up super stiff in the morning and like, I was always walking weird. Like I used to get made fun of in school for like the way that I walked, and it was my back. It was always my back. And when I was 36, so this is back in 2016, I was, I think the timeline's a little fuzzy, but I said, you know what, I'm going to start doing something about this. So that's when I found Dr. Betty. And which is, that was where
I was working.
Yeah.
And so Meredith and I were working together back when I was teaching Pilates. And like, I remember her walking in and I was like, oh my goodness, like like so young to be in so much pain, like could not lie down on her back. And it was like, your transformation was phenomenal.
So I saw Dr. Betty. She was really like the first person that she kind of like was a springboard for my like recovery, because Dr. Betty's a chiropractor. I'd never seen a chiropractor before. And she encouraged me to go get x-rays, which I had done like before. It's just whatever. Like I had x-rays done before, and like just nothing ever really came of it. It's just like, oh, your back's fucked up. And then like, oh, okay, well, there's really, what am I going to do? Have surgery? I guess. I don't know. So, which I never did, but she encouraged me to get the x-rays. And then I found out, this is the first time that I'd ever kind of gotten some sort of like diagnosis from an x-ray. And it said that I had this thing called spondylolisthesis. And essentially that is like my L5. So my like lowest kind of vertebra was like vertebrae. I don't know.
Vertebrae. Potato.
Slipped forward. It was like slipped forward like 7 millimeters. And so Betty was like, oh, this is a thing that I've encountered before. It could be, for now it's like, I think you're like mid-grade. I was like lower mid-grade, like seriousness. And she was like, my other clients have this. And she kind of, so I saw Dr. Betty, and she would like, do the TENS units, like the electro current stimulators, whatever, for your muscles in the back to try to like relieve some of the tension back there. And, there was some like mild, I think, relief every now and then. From there, I went and saw a spine specialist in Marina Del Rey. And he was like, oh, well, why don't you get MRI so I can really kind of see what's going on? So I did that. I got an MRI, and he was like, oh, okay. So it looks like you have all these other things. I mean, I'm really simplifying this like long process.
Yeah.
But essentially I got to the point where I had CT scans done. And so I went and had a CAT scan. And that's when I was actually just packing to leave to go on the road for this show that I was just telling you about. And you and I had already started working together.
Yeah.
And like, so I was getting ready to leave for like 4 months for this show. And the doctor called me because I remember it was a Friday, and I couldn't come into the office because I was going to get on a plane like that night. And so he called me with my results from the CT scan, and he said, I just want to let you know that you're not going, surgery is off the table for you because you're basically inoperable because you're so far gone. And there were like 9 different issues that I had going on. One of it being the spondy that I talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. I had like massive amounts of bone spurs just all over my lumbar spine. I had advanced osteoarthritis. I had every disc was slipped and degenerated. I had scoliosis. I had, God, what else? There's more.
As if that wasn't enough.
Yeah. And so he said to me, he was like, look, I was like, well, if I can't have surgery, and by the way, like I had been doing physical therapy and it had just kind of made it worse. And I think that's actually what kind of, that's why I ended up getting a CT scan. Because he's like, okay, this is not working. Let's see what else is going on. And so when he said, I was like, well, then what are the next steps? Like, what can I do for this like awful pain and all of this like horrible, like all these horrible kind of like structural abnormalities with me? Like, what can we do? And he was like, just try to take it easy. No more yoga. He was like, you have about 2 more years left of like full mobility, and then you're probably going to be in a chair.
Oh my gosh. I remember when you told me that. Oh
yeah. And I was just numb. I didn't even know like how to process that. And so I called my husband and I said, hey, I just got off the phone with the doctor, and I'm going to tell you what he told me, and then I never want to talk about it again because I don't really believe it right now. And whatever. It was just, I was very like not knowing how to deal with it, but I needed Ben to know. And then I just wanted to figure out how I was going to deal with it. So I told Ben, he was like, okay, I won't bring it up again. And then I left. I went, I went on the road and had like the most stressful, like production experience of my life, in which over which like that period of time, I became so much worse. And looking back now, it's because in my head, I was like, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. So all I can do is think about it, even though I told myself I wasn't going to think about it. All I could do is think about it, which just made the pain even worse. And by the time I came back and I finished that job, it was December. And I'd found out in June. So I was, about 6 months into this like ticking clock of like being in a wheelchair. And my nieces, my teenage nieces came out to visit that December, and they wanted to go indoor skydiving. And so I was like, great, I'll take you. So I took them, and I was like signing them up, and they were like, you're not doing it? And I was like, I can't do it. And I hadn't really gotten into that, like what my back issues were with them because they were so young. But I was like, no, I can't. And they were like, come on. Ugh. And like in that moment, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. If I'm going to be in a wheelchair, I'm going to at least go. And I haven't been doing anything for my body. Like I had stopped working out completely because they basically told me to. Yeah. And, my back was so much worse than it was even back then because of all this pressure. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it. If I speed up the process, who cares? Like I just had this like moment where I was like, but it was the best thing that I could have done because I did the skydiving with my nieces. It was super fun. It was like just a great experience that we all shared together. And then the next day, and I felt great afterwards because I had all this adrenaline and my back felt fine. And then the next morning I could not move. And so for the next 4 days, I did not get out of bed. And during those 4 days, I said to Ben, I was like, can you go find this book? It's called Healing Back Pain. Somebody had given it to me like 2 years prior. It was a colleague of mine who we had gone to dinner one night and we had been talking about back pain. And he's like, oh, you should read this book. It totally like saved my life because I had all this back pain too. And then I read the book and then I was like, fine. And I listened to him and I'm like, in my head, I was like, my back pain is a little more advanced than that.
Exactly.
I think that like any kind of self-help book is going to like, get me out of it. So I took the book and then I just tossed it aside and I never read it. So, but in that moment when I was laying in bed and facing, not paralysis, but basically like immobility, I was like, Ben, can you find that book? I'm like ready to read it. Like, there's anything I can do at this point. Mm-hmm. And so I read the book and then I read it again. And I got out of bed and I was like, I'm barely in pain just from reading it, just from like just from like having that knowledge now, like it doesn't hurt anymore. And that's what made me realize that, so Dr. Sarno wrote this book called Healing Back Pain. And he's written subsequent books as well. He was, a spine specialist back in like the 60s and 70s, well, the 70s and 80s really. And he was feeling like he wasn't getting a lot of fulfillment because he thought like, people are getting temporary relief. My patients are getting temporary relief, but I'm not really giving them cures. Nobody's being cured. And so he set out to kind of like research why. And, when all of his colleagues, and he was really like maligned in his industry for like.
He was.
Yeah.
Even though he is the only doctor that I have heard of that has a 96% cure rate of curing back pain from just giving knowledge alone.
Yeah, exactly. And so he basically, his whole thing, what he realized when he started like researching this, he was like, oh my God, all of these conditions that I'm diagnosing my patients with, like bone spurs, like spondylolisthesis, like scoliosis, like slip discs, and all of these things that sound really, really painful, there's no medical proof that they actually cause pain. But when people come in with back pain and then they get an x-ray or an MRI or a CAT scan done, and the doctor says, oh, you have all these abnormalities, of course this is the cause of your pain. And the patients, believe it because it's totally logical. And so then it's like reinforced, and they're like, okay, well then this means this thing that I have means pain. And so then they get surgery, but then the pain moves up to the next because it's not structural. The pain is caused by repressed emotions. It's caused by repressed rage, and we all have it for the most part. And your brain does not want you to have to go through that sadness. So your brain redirects it distracts you with like a physical, with physical pain that it feels like, oh, she can deal with the physical pain. She's not really equipped to deal with this emotional pain. But here's some physical pain, just kind of take your mind off of it. Just keep tamping it down. And also, I mean, there's like a physical component to it too, because when you get that pain, it really like it's restricting oxygen to like that kind of area of your body. So that oxygen deprivation also kind of leads to the pain. So it's a little bit of a cycle, and then you create like all the neural pathways where you're like, oh, I'm, like this is where my mind goes. So every time I run, every time I do yoga, every time I fucking sit in this position, every time I'm driving, anytime I'm sleeping, anytime I'm standing, this is what's causing pain. You're reinforcing every day. And so this book really teaches you to like, if you can just believe and just know that that your pain is not caused by structural abnormalities. It's caused by basically your brain. Just knowing that and understanding that, your pain goes away.
Girl, I am like cheering from afar. Like I am like the vibes of cheering are going into this microphone and into this podcast because like this is like one of the big things, especially like as an NLP coach. I talk with a lot of my clients about the power of labels, and what a diagnosis is it's just a label. It's another label. But what happens is with label, just like with any other word, is we make that label mean something. That label can mean something awful or something nothing. It can mean nothing, but it depends on the meaning that you give it. So I give it the example a lot of the times with labels for me, for my own health, was when I was pregnant with Declan, I had placenta previa. And what the doctors said, they gave me this label. They said, here's the diagnosis. You're not going to be able to have a natural birth. Like I was dead set on having a natural birth. I was not going to have a C-section. I was so entirely 100% focused, but the doctor was like, no, you have placenta previa. I said, okay, great, doc. What are my odds of this moving? He said, well, you have about a 50-50 shot, but you're probably, like he said, in most of my experience, you're looking at a C-section. I was like, that's not going to happen. So I just I did not make that label of the diagnosis mean anything. And knowing, what I knew from NLP, what I know from like after reading Healing Back Pain, I was like, my mind, your unconscious mind, it runs your body. And when your body has negative emotions, like where do you think it stores it? Like when your brain, when you experience negative emotions, it stores it in places in your body because it's repressing it until you're ready to deal with whatever the actual thing is. The pain is an effect of a deeper cause. Right. So that diagnosis was the effect of it was just a label. So I took the next 8 weeks and I did my research. I took some herbs. I did some Chinese herbs to help raise my body temperature. I took some with the advice of my doctors, my other doctors and my midwives. And I meditated. I did a ton of meditation and I just focused. And by the time I went back to that one technician who did perform the ultrasound, he was like shocked and blown away. He's like, how did you do it? I was like, I used my mind. But it blew out his model of the world. And I think that's one of the things that's so powerful about this book, because this was also a book that I recommended to my husband, which was actually highlighted on the show that we were on that was following our journey, which is so apropos because you turned me onto the book and then we were on a unscripted docuseries. So
totally.
Yeah. But one of the topics of the show was my husband's back pain. Like he had chronic back pain for 20 years and he had back surgery and he had blown out a disc and he had back pain ever since then. He read the book and it was like, no more back pain. Like he's had back pain 3 times since then. And he knows every time he just asks his unconscious mind and he ties it back and he's like, okay, well, what's actually triggering this? What is the actual fear? What is the thing that I'm angry about? And he starts asking the emotional questions and eventually the true cause of the pain reveals itself. Right. And the back pain is totally gone. So it's like this book, if you have back pain, I just challenge you to read it and to just read it, like, and experience it and see, because Meredith's transformation was so powerful because when she walked back into the studio, I think it was like 6 months later or something.
I can't remember. Honestly, it's a blur, but
yeah, it was like 6 months later or something. It was toward the end of like right when I was finishing up teaching Pilates, and she came back in and I was like, holy moly, what did you do? Because like she was walking completely different. She was totally able to lie on her back. She was able to do tons of Pilates exercises that I was treating her when I first was working with her. I was treating her like I had worked with geriatric patients. So it was literally like working with a totally different body because she had shifted her mindset around her body. And if you want more information around this, we will leave the book in the show notes. I will also leave some links to interviews with Dr. Joe Dispenza, who does a lot of work around the unconscious mind and negative emotions and the body. So I would highly recommend those as well. So Meredith, like now that you've had this massive transformation with your body and at the same time claiming your power, like what's next for you?
Well, I mean, it's such a hard question because I never know what's coming. Well, okay, I'll say this. So I'm continuing with my career and seeing where that takes me and getting stronger kind of every year. But I've also made a goal for 2020 to start investing in real estate and to try to kind of like pad out my retirement. And so my goal is to at least to buy my first investment property in 2020 and then to kind of compound it over like the next few years. So then like in 2021, I will buy 2 properties. In 2023, I'll buy 3, and then keep go, and then exponentially kind of like gain traction that way with it. And so like that has been my like that's my next big goal in terms of like what's next for me with making money. But really, like, happiness is something that I've been working on for the past few years, or not working on, but something that's kind of been revealing itself to me ever since I've kind of been coming out of this fog of chronic pain. I've noticed that just my serotonin levels are so much higher, and every year it's just they're getting better and better. And 2019 has been so good. Like, I'm just lighter. I'm lighter and happier. And really, it's like for the first time, I think, in my adult life. Like, can I say that?
Oh my gosh, girl, that makes me so happy to hear that. Like, that lights my heart on fire to hear that is like the big thing for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's good. It's really good. This is a really good time for me.
Let's move in to just shifting gears, because I think I know you do a lot with a lot of things that are very, very meaningful, like gender equality. And I think a lot of times in many industries, especially I've found in Hollywood, sometimes we focus on how being a woman has had a detriment, or like we've all had those like comments and whatnot. But how can we focus on being a woman as being an amazing asset? How has being a woman helped you in your career? So
it's such a good question, because my industry is notoriously male dominated.
Yes.
Yeah. But really, like, okay, women are amazing collaborators. We are amazing collaborators. And we have, there's the term women's intuition is like a very real thing. And in my job specifically, that has been such an asset to me. Kind of, and seeing and using it and being like, wow, I use this, and I see a lot of people around me not really doing that. So it kind of feels like a superpower, but I think the ease and the willingness that we have as women to collaborate, especially like when you're in a creative industry like me, is like, it's like you just gain so much from that. And then also, really using your intuition and acting on it has been a huge asset for me.
So how would you teach, in essence, men to tap into more their women's intuition? Because we all have masculine and feminine energies within us. It's just the law of polarity. But that feminine, that women's intuition, how would you advise men, especially in your industry, to tap more into that?
I think, like, trying to see beyond the ego is the advice that I would give, which is, for me, because I had it too. We all have it.
Yeah.
And for me, it really came through like a lot of meditation over like a long period of time, and then going through these experiences and being willing to learn from them, which, it doesn't really look like that with a lot of people. And so I wouldn't advise men, I don't think, to like start meditating, because I don't know that would be, the best way to reach them. But whatever you can do to drop the ego, or not drop it, but like to look past it a little bit, and to maybe like suck it up, and collaborate and being open to the success of people beneath you. You know what I mean? And to really kind of tap into this like whole world of talent that you have in the levels below you is something that is, will help you and make you look better if you just are willing to do that, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love that so much, because I think just the concept of somebody being like on a metaphysical level, like no one is beneath each other. We're all equals, but that concept of like dropping the ego, because those people have such value to offer as well in collaboration. So what is one collaboration that you found to be super successful, and why did you think that was so successful?
Well, so I've notoriously, one of the one of my weak points, that I've had to kind of try to overcome in my career is the kind of inability to delegate,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is common. And, it's like, anytime I kind of like allow somebody else to do it, it's like it doesn't get done right. So then I have to do it, and I just end up doing everything, and blah, blah, blah. And then of course that doesn't work because you can't do everything. And so somebody once told me, like a mentor of mine once told me, he said, the secret to being, this is before I was a showrunner, he said, the secret to being a good showrunner is hiring really good people. And I was like, oh, well, that kind of triggered something. I was like, yeah, like if I can actually delegate, and if I can like allow myself to do that and just see what happens. And so a project that I did, when was it? I don't know. Recently, I did this like amazing project with Hello Sunshine called Master the Mess. And it's actually getting in the process, I think, of getting picked up for season 2, which I'm really excited about.
Yay!
Yay! I really let go on that show, and I delegated, and I hired great people who did me massive favors by working within the restricted budget. And I really, really, really put so much effort into hiring the right people. And then I trusted them, and I let them own their work. And they did not let me down. And because of that, I was able to focus on, my position. They did their jobs, and the show was smooth. And the show was smooth, and it was so good. It was really good. It was a really good show. And I was blessed with like an amazing kind of network to work with, and the production company was amazing. And like, so all of these things together. Also, it didn't, it definitely helped that my staff was 85% female. And
Yeah.
also, and the males were fantastic as well. Like I just got so lucky. But I really believe that the essence of the success for that show was because I was able to let go. And so when I saw that happening, I was like, oh my God, I should have been doing this, for the past 15 years, but it's never too late.
Girl, I feel you, because I work with a lot of like beginning entrepreneurs who are just kind of, they're either starting their business or they've had their business for a little while, but it's not really moving forward. And the number one thing that I always recommend is like delegate something, even if it's like 2 hours of work to a virtual assistant or somebody. Like find a way to take some of the stuff off your plate, because I too was in that position of like doing it all myself, and all those limiting beliefs of like, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right. But I'm like, that's the ego talking. Like I had to check my ego wholeheartedly and be like, that's the ego talking. Somebody can do it 80% as good as I can, and 80% is a B, and that's really good, because that 80% allowed me 2-3 hours more time with my son, and that's the most important thing.
Right. That is 100% right. It's also like, to that point, it's also when I really started implementing balance into my life. Because normally when I'm on a job, I'm on the job and nothing else. And then when I'm not, and then when I wrap the job and I'm off for a month or whatever, then I'm just like, trying to like catch my breath and like, exercise a little bit and just go through my mail.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I don't have to be that way. You know what I mean? And so like, to your point, it helps in so many ways in every area.
Oh, that is such a theme going on right now in just the past couple of interviews that I've been having for this show. So thank you so much. So let's dive in to some rapid fire to wrap this up. So you ready?
I am.
All right. What is your favorite female character in a movie?
Rose McGowan's character in, oh my God, what's it called? It's the Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino, Grindhouse.
Grindhouse.
yeah, I can't remember her name right now because it's rapid fire and there's so much pressure, but she has a machine gun for a leg. And so she's my like most badass character of all time.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, totally badass. So if you were queen of a country, what would be your prime focus?
It would be women's issues.
Mm-hmm. What would you consider to be your kingdom or queendom?
What would I consider to be?
Mm-hmm. How would you define that?
Okay. So it would be inclusive. It would be collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
It would be definitely not a dictatorship. It would be cruelty free. I would be encouraging people to, not eat animals, but not making them not. It would be, but I think inclusion would be like my overall main focus.
I love that. If your palace had a curse jar, how much money would you have to put in on a daily basis? How much money would you charge yourself, and how much money would you have to put in on a daily basis?
For me, myself?
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like I need to think about this. $100.
$100. Awesome. What woman would you want to trade places with just for one day?
Michelle Obama.
If you had to have your success at twice the speed, how would you have done it?
I would have cut out all of my successes and only kept my failures.
Love that. Damn, girl. What message do you want to share with the world?
Be open to other perspectives. Start listening more. Just start listening more. Close your mouth and listen, because that is where change is made.
And lastly, how do you crown yourself?
I remind myself that nobody's going to die if I don't do these last few things on my to-do list. I remind myself that, it's okay to leave work at 7:00, even though everything's not done. And I make sure that I listen to at least one Queen song a day.
Amen. I love that.
Don't Stop Me Now is like my morning motivation every morning.
Oh my gosh, me too. Not every morning, but that's definitely one of my like workout running jams. That's so amazing. Meredith, it has been such a pleasure. Where can we find you? How can we support you in all that you're doing?
Well, you can find me on I would say find me on Twitter. I'm at Prunkard. That's drunkard with a P, basically. That's how you spell it. At Prunkard. Just so look out. I always kind of plug like whatever show I have coming out and all of the things that I'm proud of with all of my endeavors I will post about, and follow me on Twitter and, check out the things that I care about and see how you can help.
I love it. I love it. And we will have links in the show notes for you to check out all that is the amazing Meredith Prunkard. That is P. That's like drunkard with a P. I love the fact that you said that. That's funny. And as always, my fellow queens, if you loved this episode, please take a screenshot of it and tag me at Crown Yourself Now on Instagram so that I can know what your top takeaway is. And as always, I do have a special hypnosis for those of you who take a screenshot of your review. If you love this episode, please leave a review, take a screenshot, email it to info@crownyourself.com, and I will send you a free hypnosis. Thank you so much, Meredith, for coming on. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you again. And
same. Thank you so much. Your energy is so good.
Thank you so much. And as always, my fellow empire builders, own your throne, mind your business, and make it rain.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If what you heard resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and share your breakthroughs and ahas with me by leaving a review on iTunes so I can keep the magic flowing your way. And if you aren't already following us on social media, come experience the extra inspiration and queenly convos on Instagram at Crown Yourself Now, or visit our website at crownyourself.com. I am so excited to connect with you in the next episode. And in the meantime, go out there and create a body, business, and life that rules.